Streaming live from Treaty 1 territory in the heartland of the Métis Nation, the place where the Great Waterways meet and the heart of Turtle Island. We have guests from the territory of Toronto, which is grounded in the Treaty of a Dish with One Spoon and is home to some of the most diverse population in Canada. We also have a guest from Tiohtià:ke and Australia. I'm so excited to host the 8th Nuit Blanche Talk Series, Digital Pivoting. Yes, I said it, pivoting over use of the screen. We have some incredible speakers on this topic. And first up is Brooke Andrew, who's the artistic director of Naren, the 22nd Biennale of Sydney in Australia. He's an artist and also a professor at Monash University. Next up, we have Emily Fitzpatrick, director of Trinity Square Video and has been an independent curator and arts administrator in Toronto. Then we have Jason Lewis, who's a professor and research chair in computational media and the Indigenous Future Imaginary at Concordia University in Montreal, which there's been some debate if it's the best or not. But you know, we'll see. Then we have Nikki Little, who's the artistic director of Imaginative Film and New Media Festival in Toronto, which is the largest festival of its kind in the world. And next we have Anna Serrero, who is the president and vice chancellor of OCAD University and past chief digital officer of the Canadian Film Centre with a track record as a global leader and visionary in digital media. And finally, we have Ra El, who is a media and performance-based artist and is one of our featured artists for Nuit Blanche 2020-2021. Tonight is bittersweet as we wind down the talks and finish sections of Nuit Blanche, like Nuit Live and Nuit in Your Neighborhood. We are contemplating what we are left with these huge shifts of the virtual realm. Tonight, our guests have extensive knowledge in digital media and or as well work in the area of moving exhibitions online. I'm excited to dialogue tonight about the panic, everybody shifting to the virtual and having to, or validations of existing work in digital media. We'll question the visual and the political through the digital fold, how we've had to shift to presenting exhibitions and events digitally, situated in the intersection of public closures, growing demands for racial justice. The speakers will work to reflect on their past work and political commitments. They will openly engage with the complexities of safety, representation, and inclusion to foreground a new digital world we are moving towards. Like it or not, AR, VR, MR, AI are quickly taking a strong presence in our global society. And tonight's conversation is going to be fascinating and exciting to reflect on this new age of media. I think it's best if we start with Brooke and his rapid response to the shifting of a massive exhibition with thousands of people this March in the city of Toronto who had to return home. And some of us on this call were actually part of that. So I think, Brooke, if you want to start us off and talk a little bit about some of the work that you set up for Naren and its importance of situating it as the first kind of Indigenous artist-centered version, I think will be super fantastic place to start.
Yeah, my Julie and everyone, it's really great to be here. And I'm zooming in from the lands of the Wurundjeri and in Melbourne, Australia. It's really great to be here and to talk about, yeah, the kind of excitement of the digital platform, but also that incredible shift. So Naren is the 22nd Biennale of Sydney. It just closed, actually. We did, when I say just closed, it physically did close, but then it did open again as well. So I think it's the longest running Biennale, even it had a little holiday in the middle. It's so in some ways we've been very lucky, but of course, you know, some international people couldn't see it. The image you see behind me is from Kunmanara Mumi Mike Williams, who's a Pitjantjatjara artist from the Western Desert. And you'll see that actually we worked with Apple to create this augmented reality translation of his Pitjantjatjara language. And these are banners that were hung up, and we worked very closely with his community. And I think that the pivoting of kind of when the Biennale did have to go online was very important, especially for remote communities, because a lot of people couldn't come and travel because it costs a lot of money across vast territories of Australia, but also internationally. So in some ways, this kind of shift to, you know, online was really great. Also working with technologies like augmented reality meant that, you know, these artworks could actually travel through time and space without actually physically traveling the work as well. You know, we kind of could use different indicators for that. and also within the catalogue. And I think it's really important to echo what you're saying about creating safe places, especially for First Nations and artist-led biennales or initiatives, or artistic kind of events, because often the issues, especially today when there's urgency around sovereignty, the decolonial issue that we're really finally getting our hands dirty with, also around queerness, around monuments. I mean, all of that kind of the environment. I think I've mentioned that. It's important to create safe environments. And I think that that's one thing we really did within Nidan. I mean, it was all for the public to see as well, even on the website. And so when we did have this statement from traditional elders about how we could kind of draft these messages, they were absolutely now part of the digital platform. I think that also now that some artists have, working on their own digital extension of really works that were in the Biennale too, it has been a real kind of energy, behind this and build up. And in fact, Nidan has travelled to Melbourne now, but on a digital platform. So we're creating a film program now, which I'll share with you all, which is really exciting, especially that most people from around the world couldn't see a lot of those films. But of course, film is one of those more easier, kind of medium, so to speak, that can actually move to an online platform.
Yeah, I think also too, I think if you want to expand a little bit about, the fact that you guys had to close, and then you were doing a really incredible job of kind of like giving a virtual tour, right? So, and I think that would be important for a lot of people listening, is that, I think that there were a lot of talking heads. So, as soon as the pandemic hit, I was making jokes that if I had to see another older lady talk about the importance of their collection and their museum space, I was like gonna fall asleep. So I think that you guys did just such a great job of like really critically engaging your viewership, but also giving kind of context about the different work. And I mean, and I guess it helps that you had the physical space, but if you want to expand on that, I think it would be great.
Yeah, and I think that I think that you're also hinting at too is that because it is Indigenous led and artist led, the Indigenous philosophies that were built within the actual structure meant that even through public programs and tours had to be kind of through those protocols and through those systems of presentation, which are very different to your kind of traditional way of presenting. Even Tony Albert's work, an Aboriginal artist from Australia, this is his work behind me. It's called Healing Land. And it was very, you did have to get your hands in there literally with seeds and plant seeds. And then these seeds would be sent to places around Australia, like the Blaketown Native Institution, which is the first site of removal of Aboriginal children in early colonial times. And of course that had to go online then. And so, how is it that, these experiences were really captured? How is it that people could share that experience and also that journey for the artist? And that definitely did happen online. You can see a lot of the Biennale online now. You can get these walks and these tours that are artist-led, that are Indigenous-led. The beginning of every event was led through ceremony as well, and that also shifted to the online platform too. And I think it's really important what you're saying about who is speaking for whom and how is it that we talk, and that how that's translated to an online platform, I think is really important to keep that integrity. And I think that often when you do transform something to an online platform, you think, how do you decolonize that space, or how do you take that journey with you? That creates not only a safe place, because safe is such a loaded term, it means many things to different people, but how is it that, people feel like, yeah, I have ownership over that, or, I can kind of identify with that still, even within an online platform. One other thing that I'd love to share as well is, so this is Niran Ngay, which means to see the edge. So this is Wiradjuri language, which is my mother's language group from Western New South Wales. And I worked with artists and designers to create the catalogue. So we have two catalogues. We have the kind of traditional catalogue, so to speak, and then we have a reader artist book. And they've actually translated this online now. So you can actually go to Niran Ngay and you can see all of the artists, all the international artists works, poetry, social political kind of movements, etc., within this kind of tightly bound, curated catalogue. And I think that the artists have done such an extraordinary job, and they did this post Biennale. They did it, without. What I mean by post Biennale, I mean like post no more money left. Do you know what I mean? Post, oh, okay, things are online now. So like I mentioned before, artists are still continuing with their projects, but they're putting it online themselves, or aspects of that. So I think that there has been a real collaboration, and I think that's really important. That kind of working together, which is a very important theme of Knitting as well.
Absolutely. And I think that's important. I think it's going to be a good spot for Jason to pick up, who's got a long-standing relationship with computational media and has been working hard in that realm for a long period of time. And I think it'll be great for you to expand on some of the work that you've done in the past, and then how it lends itself to our current climate.
So thank you, Julie, and thank you everybody who's tuning in, for joining us. I actually have to take care of just give me a second, okay?
Oh, okay. A child. I know it. I can
Yes,
see it in your face.
exactly. Yeah. So
I locked mine out. I locked the door and they can't come in.
Eldest literally took exactly the moment you introduced me to like crank the TV on upstairs. So anyways, so yeah, so we've been working sort of in virtual spaces for over 20 years now. And when I say we, I'm talking about my wife and collaborator, Skawanati, as well, who started Cyber Powwow 1996, which was the first online exhibition or online gallery to showcase Indigenous work, and sort of been kind of evolving since there. And for the last 12 years, we've had a presence in cyberspace called Abtech Island. And so this is in the virtual environment called Second Life, which is a full sort of 3D world that you can go into. You have an avatar that you can customize, and then you can build things in that space. So we own, well, we don't own, we lease. We lease an island in Second Life. As Kawanati says, real Indians paying virtual money for virtual land. We originally established it actually kind of as a movie set for Skawanati's machinima practice, movie making in virtual environments. But over time, as we got to sort of know it more, we sort of started thinking of it as a kind of a permanent outpost in cyberspace. In the last 4 years, we've really pushed on that. We have it's now every Friday afternoon. It moves around a little bit depending on what's happened in the semester, but once a week we have a 2-hour session where there's a couple of us that are there in the world, and we invite everybody to come and join us, and we show them how to customize their avatar and how to build things and how to move in that virtual space. And then for one of Skawanati's machinimas, she created a gallery that she called Museum of the Future, and she populated it with artworks from some of our most talented Indigenous artists for her movie shoot and for machinima. And so when COVID hit, we thought, okay, why don't we actually sort of turn it into a real gallery? I mean, start having shows there on a regular basis. And so the first thing that we did is that we basically took that show that had been put up for the shoot. We asked all the artists if they would be interested in having that be a real show, and they all agreed. And so we launched the first show in, I think it was August, or maybe it was July of this year, and had a digital vernissage and everything like that. We did tours, and we then launched our second show here in September, and we're going to have we immediately, when we launched it, we started getting inquiries from lots of different people about sort of our experience in the virtual and as an exhibition space, as a making space, as a teaching space. And so that was really interesting. And it's led to the third show is actually going to be people who approached us and made a proposal to us about they're really interested in using the space for an exhibition. So I think that, what part of what's interesting to me is this question, really trying to think hard through this question of, why, I mean, it's different now because it's COVID and there's not a lot of choices, but one of my questions always is like, why do what motivation do you have for making people come to a screen?
Yeah.
Right? So, as opposed to pick up a book, right? Or go out to a gallery in a physical space, or whatever it might be. So what is it about these environments that we can leverage that are difficult to do or maybe impossible to do in the real world? So, the obvious ones like interactivity, time shifting, being able to create fantastical worlds that people can inhabit. So there's lots of interesting answers to that. But one of the things that I try to always ask and encourage the people who are coming to us to ask themselves is, really a deep question of why do this, right? So what is it? What is your audience going to get out of it? Because it's still challenging for a lot of people, right? There's challenges on the resource side. They may not have good equipment. They may not have good connectivity. They may not know how to use the technology very well. So, for some non-trivial part of your audience, particularly I think when we're working with Indigenous communities, you might be creating quite a barrier for them to participate and enjoy the work that you want them to see. What kind of environment are you going to construct for them to be in? How are you going to navigate it? Because a lot of times people, like, the first impulse is to recreate what was supposed to be in the real world, right? And that doesn't work, right? You got to think. It's sort of like I was talking, one of the research centers just down the hall from me is a mobilities research cluster, and so they think a lot about people who are differently able, the elderly, etc., and how to make things accessible. And we were talking about how that it's kind of, in some ways, it's a little bit of that mindset, is that you got to kind of take what you think and a bunch of assumptions you make about how to move through space, how to look at things and things like that, and actually kind of rethink them for this flat plane, that people are trying to access your exhibition or your workshop or whatever it might be for. So, but it's also super exciting. I mean, there's way more people coming and visiting now than there was before. We'll take it. It's exciting that there are people coming to us. It's super exciting that we're going to be working with somebody else for the next exhibition. It's going to be a learning experience for us, I think, to figure out how to support that, right? Because it involves, I'm very blessed that I work with an incredibly talented crew of student research assistants. And so we're going to have to get them involved. They're going to have to, build sets, basically build out the space and customize that space. And we're going to have to imagine what it is, and then think through all these different questions. And I went from being like, okay, this will be kind of cool, let's try it and see what it's like, to now I'm super jazzed, and I'm excited to like do programming out for the next 2 or 3 years, and sort of see what we can make of it. So I think that's probably, I think that's good for an opening anyways.
Yeah, how do you squish like 20 years into like a little like 5-minute bubble?
Yeah, and I'm just gonna drop the URL
Perfect.
into the chat there. Oh, that's just the participants. Oh, I can't send it to, oh yeah, here we go, end attendees.
There you go. Okay, so I was thinking it's a good spot for Raw for you to pick up and talk a little bit about, because I think that, there's some nice parallels with some of the work that Jason and Skalwanati are doing, and you're, a net based artist and performance artist and does video. And so I think like, the lot of your characters and practices, I would say, lend themselves to avatars, actually, if that, and I know for, for Nuit Blanche, we had your beautiful Blue Girl work as a VR work, and showcased your past video work and performance work, Supernova. So I think it'd be great if you want to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, great. I actually just had a talk with Skalwanati last week as part of my exhibition in Montreal that closed down after 5 days. Well, there's a vitrine display now, but yeah, what a shame. I was there and it was like, we're in yellow zone, we're in green zone, we're in red. No, it's shut down altogether. But so it's pretty disappointing, disheartening after, how long it takes to plan these things and to mount the show. But anyway, yeah, so the work there is Supernova, and I'm also showing that at Nuit Blanche as a kind of virtual screening, and then the Blue Girl VR work, which was meant to be a 3-channel like panoramic video installation, and to adapt it to VR was really interesting, and even it added like another like surreal quality. It was even more surreal and bizarre. So yeah, and I think the shift for me as an artist, I working digitally and then having the net art practice through like the character Oreo and whatnot, it's always a real challenge to adapt the work to a gallery setting, because you're trying to like emulate the the aesthetics of the interface, and so to create it for a gallery setting is a lot more challenging than to just leave it on the kind of democratic space of the internet where everyone has access to it. But and then again, there's the interactivity of that kind of engagement with cyber art. So yeah, I'm kind of rambling. What was your question? Sorry.
I just think you could talk a little bit, and I think it's important that you talk a little bit about your practice, and I think that how it's been impacted. Obviously, you just said you just opened an exhibition, and us for we decided to go entirely virtual because partly because when we were in Sydney, the decision of like working towards an exhibition in real space and then going to a code red wasn't something that I was super excited about. And the other thing I would say is that, you've been able to translate your work into a digital realm because you already work in that medium, right?
Yeah, I do. And the work is available as a single channel, so it can be screened online. So it's flexible in that way. For example, the installation at the Keel is 2 channels, or you could have like Blue Girl as a 3-channel large installation where you're immersed in it, or you could do a VR and be immersed in it that way. So and I think immersion is an important part of that work, because there's a sense of like embodiment that the women experience, and to trying to get the viewer to feel that, I don't know, like I always find like my work is very maximalist. I like to bring in everything, all the lights, and really overwhelm the viewer with the seduce them, bring them in, but then also kind of ambush them with difficult issues in an accessible way as well, with the humor and the characters and all of that. So yeah, and then there's the characters themselves. I mean, to be able to use digital compositing and to film everything on green screen and to put them into one place, into one space, imagined space together, is really effective, because it allows me to talk about the nuances of my experiences, but also it provides like a nice stage to critically examine these characters side by side and also allow them to interact with one another. And I think that is a really like exciting part of my practice, where I'm able to do that, to bring all of these, to create these worlds, but also to bring all these characters, and then you show the tension between them and the nuances in the performance and all of that as well. So
yeah, and I think it's really important because you construct those characters physically, in Supernova, they become like embodied characters, but
yeah,
in Blue Girl, they are actually they look like digital renderings, whether they've been shot as real people with green screen that have then been altered. But I mean, they give you that feeling of that kind of futuristic, kind of alien like characters, right? That are real, but not our normal day to day.
yeah, and they're very glitchy. I mean, with Coco, you get a lot of that kind of glitch art with the layering of the character through the dancing, and the character moves across channels, whereas the others are just kind of static. But there's always a kind of digital component, whether it's changing the voice somehow, like the high-pitched vocal of Oreo versus the lower-pitched vocal of Sirius, and then the generated text to voice of Bellatrix. So there's a lot of kind of room for digital exploration there through the voice and physicality of the characters. So it's very exciting.
For sure. I think it's a good time we can get Anna to talk a little bit about some of your past work at the Canadian Film Center, and then also your new work as the OCAD president. So I think that, you know, you're leading the helm of two really strong, you know, I made the argument of one of the leading schools in Canada in terms of digital art and media. And I'd say the same thing with the Canadian Film Center. You know, it's got a really strong presence of that. So I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about some of that work.
Sure. Well, I mean, I want to talk about how basically I've got whiplash right now. So the type of pivoting that I'm doing is like pivoting from digital to analog, analog to digital, et cetera. And it really focuses on sort of some parts of myself that encompass both those two institutions. So I'm gonna talk about them in turn. So first and foremost, at the Film Center, you know, the last 5 years have been about VR, and immersive media. And so I've been producing all sorts of VR media works. In fact, I don't know when that was, Jason, but I think we worked with Scalanetti and Adtech Island a long time ago, where we actually did the first VR, like it was when Oculus came out, the first version of Oculus came out, and we hacked into Second Life so that we could have real-time conversations with characters in Concordia in their avatar form in Adtech Island at Hot Docs. So that was like, you know, one of our first forays into that. And so, you know, and so so VR, that's one. And then I'm going to go back to all of these. Okay, so VR is something that I'm kind of I see myself as a producer of that. At the same time, I've been producing theater. Like I only produced one piece of theater, but it's been like for 10 years, this musical that I've been involved in for 10 years in different forms. And we were finally getting a chance to do a major workshop at Citadel Theater when COVID hit. So I've had to rethink how that impacted, okay? And then there's, you know, as a mother, so, you know, having to deal with the child at home, figuring out what to do. Do we engage him in terms of how much screen time does he get, how much not screen time, how do we deal with schooling, all that sort of stuff. And then obviously this new job of opening up the school and thinking about the impact as it relates to both how do you build a culture and a community when you've never met any of the people or you've met like some of the people in this new gig, right? But there's 300 of them that you've never met before. And then God knows what the students are all going to be like. So because of all those just different pieces of my life, I've had to kind of have very specific notions of what the pivot means, what this pivot means. In terms of VR, I think my biggest pivot, even though it seems completely almost like a non-brainer that this would save everyone during COVID times, right? I just, for example, tried the Star Wars with my son. I don't know if anyone has tried the new Star Wars game where you're actually inside the Millennium Falcon flying around and you've got your buddy in a different starship and you're doing something. I mean, it's phenomenal, right? But at the same time, you're so clearly thinking, Jesus, like no one can do this. Like there's just not enough headsets out there. And then further, you're like, and Facebook just made the Oculus, you know, the new Quest, Facebook, you need to have Facebook sign in. And so I cannot possibly keep going in this direction because from a political standpoint, it is just so fraught with so many problems, right? So a lot of the work I do is also in the democracy space. And certainly, you know, I've been a critique of, as Jason knows, of, you know, the technology monopolies that we're now being subjected to and oppressed by. And certainly, even though we know this is the space that we can find such beauty in as artists and as makers of content, the tech stack is so problematic that so that pivot, that's like a whiplash that's going on that hasn't resolved itself yet. The only light that I can see is potentially AR. So because you can use similar production techniques, but then this is way more accessible perhaps, and there's things that you can do. So that's one. In the theater space, I mean, that's just a whole other, I mean, it's frightening what's going on in that particular realm, you know. I think there's tons of people who are valiantly trying to reimagine what that looks like. And for us, you know, in particular, what we're trying to do is think of what does a workshop look like in Zoom, basically. You know, it's a musical that we're making. So musical and Zoom, they don't go together. So they haven't figured out how to mix audio through these channels, right? So having a live musical reading in Zoom is impossible. So then you have to go, okay, how do I take Tao and the Get Down, Up, Down? I don't know if everyone's seen that video. Came out in May. It's like the best Zoom music video of all time. So we're thinking, okay, can we do a script workshop using those types of techniques? And so all of a sudden you get kind of excited because this is such a constrained form that it becomes such an exciting form because it's so constrained that you're starting to think, okay, what would happen if we start to think of each box as a wormhole that we have to go into, and then what happens to the narrative if each of these boxes are narrative wormholes? So all of a sudden, from a theater perspective, it can become exciting, but there's always that hint of nostalgia that it's never going to be quite the same as if you're there in real life, right? And then in terms of the mother part, the single most important technology that I think I pivoted to, and I would buy stocks on it, like if I had tons of money, is Discord. So it's really about the primacy and immediacy of audio that has driven a lot of the kind of, I think that has impacted much of the sort of need for connection that I know my kid has, right? So you know, I read a lot about the mental health of kids, and I think that's probably true. But honestly, because we allowed him to play video games and to hang out with, this was the only way he could hang out with friends, and the only way he could have fun with friends was he just happened to be playing games that had Discord on it, so that they could chat the whole time, right? So that really, to me, the audio part. So thinking about liveness, and so thinking about the relationship between liveness, immediacy, intimacy, connection, as you're navigating even different cyber locations or cyber spaces, I think is something that's kind of interesting. And it's also, there's a notion of the persistence of audio that is different from the persistence of the visual form, which I think is also interesting. So that's something that I'm kind of grappling with. And then, so all of that stuff I take into account as I now move into this other place called the university, and where we're trying to go, okay, how do we make school like that? How do we create those feelings of connection and intimacy? Now the good news is, as president, I don't actually have to think about that, and there's a whole slew of really, really smart faculty people who are doing a tremendous amount of work in that space, but they're thinking exactly about these same things, which is, you know, how do you provide access? So asynchronous learning becomes a key thing. And most people think that the best way to teach is to do this Zoom thing. And there is a place for that, but never underestimate the need for access, for any time, any place type of access to the learning experience, right? And that has actually proven to be quite an important thing for students. The other thing too is this need for connection. So really building in, what's that persistent media form where people feel that they're still connected to each other, even though things might not be on. And I don't think we've answered that yet. I'm not sure what that is. So we're experimenting with a variety of things that we're thinking of, but we're not quite sure if they're going to work. So
Yeah, and
I think I'll stop there. Yeah.
No worries. I was just gonna say, I think too, it's like, I think those are good questions to just pose. And I, like, even today I did a talk with the AGO and the panelists, we only had like 30 minutes to talk. And we actually stayed on the Zoom call for another 45 minutes because people felt like we had only just like barely scratched the surface. And I think partly it's, and I'm gonna then, lean on Nikki because, with all this incredible programming that they were doing with Imaginative and the same thing that we're doing with the Indigenous delegation at MIT, it's like, as much as I don't like the idea of sitting on the screen any longer, because I actually don't want to hang out on it, but then I realize that I miss my friends and colleagues and those kind of like spontaneous connections, dialogues, meeting new people that can't happen actually without having some kind of a virtual hangout space, or just how you said, some kind of space that's live, that's open, that people can engage with. And I think that that's going to be a really interesting conundrum as we kind of continue to move forward. I mean, we don't see there being any kind of like real end date in sight right now. We definitely know that, this kind of virtualness is not going to go away. And I definitely say that, like, how do we think about, like, we make jokes that Imaginative is like Indigenous people's Christmas, and so it's like, to not actually be in the physical space, getting to see everybody, being part of those events, I think is going to be a really huge shift. And Nikki, if you want to talk a little bit about how you guys have programmed and worked towards thinking about how to get those kinds of engagement through a virtual event.
Sure. Thanks for everyone sharing their thoughts so far. It's really a lot of good things just to think about. I'm like writing notes as we go. And I think, I've been in Imaginative. This is my second festival. Last year was the first one. And this year I was like, sweet, now I know what I'm doing. And then everything happened. So it's been really interesting for us. Naomi Johnson started off as executive director like a month right after me. So it's been really lovely that working in tandem with her, I have to say, to be able to, she made the decision really early out in March saying like, we're just going online. And so I was really happy that, that was quick. We were able to just then shift focus right away to research and to figure out how we're going to do with it, how we're going to pivot, and how we're going to get together. Because so much of Indigenous gathering is just getting together, sharing meals, networking. I like to call it fall camp, because I think about the fall equinox. So I'm trying to get that going, but nobody's getting behind me. But
fall camp is better than Christmas, because I don't really like Christmas, but I liked it. I like the analogy that people get excited about it.
Yeah, I can walk you through the line. We gather. Okay. We have our harvest. We're bringing our works. We're networking. We're sharing our ideas. We're also socializing and sharing food and celebrating each other in the harvest. So that's my pitch for it. Hopefully it will become a viral thing. I doubt it. Anyways, so we moved on. So we moved online quite quickly. And the thing that's just so unique about Imaginative is we have film and video, which is quite strong. And last year we became an Oscar qualifying festival for short format live action, which is amazing. First Indigenous festival to do so. And then we also have a component of media arts. And I think, for Imaginative, that's quite key, because that's sort of how we came into film and video, to actually having space in those worlds, is through artists working in different mediums. Artists, I think, like Indigenous artists and innovation quite in tandem, and think it's like, they're working with innovation. We've always been innovative. We've always worked with tools, and these are new tools that we're telling stories with. And so for me, I think it's like quite nice that we are going online and actually making more emphasis for sort of artists that are working in digital realm, the collaborations that we have, like we partner with Trinity Square Video, which is really amazing. And we partnered with you last year, and Jason as well. We have ongoing partnerships with you. And so I think for us, like, just being able to say like all of these artists are working fluidly, like between all of these spaces in remarkable ways, is so important. And that binary of like film versus media, this is weird media, oh, that's just like weird industry film, like why can't those kind of have more dialogues? And I'm hoping that this moment, I think for us specifically, is where those things can maybe have more crossover. People can engage and discover how many different artists we have. This year we have I think 159 Indigenous artists represented through all of the works in 98 different nations. And so for us, thinking through platforms and thinking through how we can move forward with that, you know, considering how our audiences are going to engage with us. You know, internet speed and access to technology is a huge issue for Indigenous communities. And I think for us, that was like something that we wanted to look at right away. So we did a survey of our audiences and got the feedback and sort of I saw where people are accessing work. And I think for us, that was key in terms of that too. And some of the things that I'm constantly kind of thinking about in this space is sort of that has come up already through other folks, is sort of like, why are we putting this online or in this digital realm in this way? Like, does it need to, what's the value in it? What are we valuing for it? I find for myself in this role, and I guess just in my own practice, is like being super conscious about consumption. And I feel like being in COVID and the consumption culture online of like people just, you know, we need more content, and like how do we support slow how do we support like meaningful work and maybe that connectivity that some things have come up, and how do we make those things yeah, you can feel them, that they can be a part of it. And so that's been a kind of a key for us to trying to think through the festival, because so much of a part of it is gathering. And I think I have to commend the team for producing, for being overachievers. I think we launched on Tuesday, and I think everyone will be quite impressed with sort of what we've been able to do. And it's opened up spaces for us to be able to connect with artists and get some recordings right away of people that wouldn't maybe necessarily be there, but also to be able to share a welcome song from a more international perspective, be able to connect with our international nations in a different way. And then also, yeah, I think one thing that we wanted to ground it in this year, and thinking about specifically the pandemic, is like what are the needs of our audiences? Like, I know artists' gigs are kind of like at the beginning, we're getting cut, we're being shifted, we're being like all of this stuff. So money was just getting, you know, out of the artist right away. And so for us, we were in a privileged position in that the funders and everyone was like, all of this money was coming to, you know, support the organizations to keep going, to what's your pivot? Let's figure it out. And so we were really concerned about what's the artist going to do? How can we ensure that they're getting really good artist fees? Because right now it's also the Wild West in terms of like, how long's the duration? What is the access point for people, for audiences to engage with the work? Like, what are the barriers for the artists? Because I feel like artists right away, when everything went in lockdown, provided the hope, provided like the vision for people to keep going, because they just put their work up online for people to share, for people to enjoy. And so I think for us, like, that was something. So we were able to, like myself, Jason Ryle, who's previous executive director, and Naomi kind of came together and just talked and decided to do a giveaway. We've always wanted to do a giveaway, and a giveaway is often different in different nations. And I think just around Indigenous reciprocity, Indigenous gift giving. And so it's been really nice to be able to like think about that and sort of not think about the digital pivot, but think about how we're going to give back to this community in like tangible ways that people need things. And so we're happy to announce that we're able to manage and pivot with our funders and sponsors to be able to give away 53,000, I think, in awards this year. We're able to give an incredible, like the biggest artist fees we've been able to do for our screening folks. And then also, I think over $20,000 in giveaways to actual audience members. And that ranges from health and wellness, Indigenous artists that we're working with to commission works. And then also just like, you know, gift cards to Sobeys, because who doesn't need $500 worth of groceries right now? Because that's something that I could need. And so I think we also got, you know, Northwest Company on board too, because that's what all the grocery stores are in Northern Reserves, are northern stores. So these are the kinds of things that we really wanted to touch on while we were pivoting to think of like, and our platforms are supposed to be able to adapt to the different bandwidths that people have. So hopefully, like, you know, in slower communities, that it will adjust its stream to figure that out. And I know, and I like hear Anna and some of the things about where we're getting the tech from. For me, that's really challenging, because, you know, we're doing all of these things where we can, but then I'm thinking about, well, where is the platform coming from? Who owns that? And I'm just like, I don't want to say it, but you know, it's unfortunate, I think, in those things. And it's like, how can we support like open software or things that are still, that can be safe, that we can adjust, or that artists are already doing and producing that technology, and how can we get money to them? and help them do that work to support our stuff too. So I think like, you know, thinking about Indigenous economies in that way, and then also doing that for how we work in terms of like Indigenous economies for that, not only tech, but also with the artists who we're employing and all that kind of stuff to keep it local.
Yeah, it's so important, and I think you guys have just done such an incredible job, and it's been really amazing to kind of like witness. And I know from firsthand experience, it's difficult work, and so I think that it's going to be interesting to see where we go, and then how the future kind of holds maybe some really incredible hybrid models of like really strong kind of like virtual content, of even going back to what Brooke said about getting those bits of information out to people that would have never been able to come into Sydney to come and witness the exhibition the way that you would want them to, and that there's these kind of like really nice transmissions that are even happening, you know, even though, you know, the example that Anna said about Facebook and the Oculus, it's just like, you know, that the same way that we communicate through media has been allowed us to mobilize globally and have these kind of really strong global conversations. And I'm hopeful that media is going to, not media as in like social media, but digital media will allow us those tools and platforms to keep pushing, you know, those boundaries. I know, Emily, you guys have done such great work at Trinity Square Video, and you've been such a strong advocate for digital media artists in your independent practice and also in your role as the director. And so you want to talk a little bit about the work that you've done, and I think it'd be a fair rein to like, you know, talk about you know, not just as a rant, but as our reality is that, you know, we've got this really incredible group of people who have been doing work for a really long period of time, and I think it's going to be great to hear from you.
Oh, thanks, Julie, and thanks everyone. I'm really happy and excited to get into this. So I guess I'll just talk a little bit about how TSV moved forward, moving online. Luckily, I don't want to say luckily or fortunately, you know, we're forced to do this, but 2021, a lot of the programming that we had scheduled had the capacity to exist online. So we kind of pushed forward, but we really wanted to push forward with a lot of intention and a lot of thoughtfulness, and also a lot of care for the artists and curators that we were working with, since nobody was at 100%. So we tried to be as resourceful as possible in using existing works or existing platforms just in the beginning, to kind of alleviate that stress and pressure to get online in a way that has been, I think we can all agree, very underexplored in terms of the larger context sort of thing. So it was a lot of pressure, you know, we're a media arts center. So it was like, what are you gonna do? It was pretty intense and pretty stressful in the first few months, but I think we kind of caught our bearings. And obviously, before scheduling everything, we made sure to give the artists the options to postpone, because I appreciate the value in having artists occupy physical space. So there was always that conversation outright. But just to speak about a few programs that we're able to translate online, starting last April, we hosted a data visualization project with Tiara Roxanne about data colonialism and her ongoing research into the embedded biases in machine learning, particularly when it came to the statistical and census data for Indigenous folks across North America. So this, the main component of the exhibition was actually a website kind of outlining the bias and the various injustices associated to data colonialism. So that wasn't a hard leap to go online, but we had to kind of take into account how people were going to navigate the website. Obviously, entering a gallery is different than opening a website and trying to go through the process of learning what the data visualization was going to be. So we had to take that into account. But in tandem with the website, there was also a Zoom performance, Tiara's first Zoom performance, which is very interesting, kind of a performance happening in the square of Zoom. And Anna, I'm totally with you there about the Zoom constraints and kind of trying to play with that a little bit, but that was early on in April. And then also there was a conversation with her friend, her best friend who knew her work too. So we really wanted to keep it loose, wanted to be comfortable as we were trying to navigate these online ways of public presentation. The following exhibition was Performing Lives, which was curated by Zoe Chan, who's a Vancouver curator. And the exhibition had already shown in Montreal in 2018. So we thought that this would be a good opportunity to make an online exhibition, since all the works were video works. There are 5 video works. So really we just used a simple Squarespace template and did a little design in the back end. It was like a very clean blog-like website, but what was kind of special and nice is that there was an opportunity to include like ephemeral material and documentation from the production and any kind of like commentary that Zoe would like to add, just, you know, in retrospect. So that was kind of an interesting pivot. We're going to use the continual word pivot, but it was nice to kind of think of the archive in a different way when it comes to the potential of online exhibitions and what you can incorporate in an exhibition space online. So that was, and then also you could like learn about the analytics, like who is tuning in from where, and just another form of like audience information, audience engagement. And then this fall, we have a few online projects that are launching. Our annual theme commission is online. We're co-presenting with Dames Making Games, who's a art game-based organization here in Toronto. Originally, the new commission works were going to be exhibited in the TMAC building where Dames Making Games is located, but we made the quick decision to just do it online. And games existing online, it's again a nice easy transition. I don't want to say easy. I have to stop like casualing it up. It's it's a whole other realm of operation, which I appreciate. But instead of like thinking about how people play in public spaces, it was about how you play in remote locations. So kind of concentrating on this form of play with friends and kind of diving into the intimacies of, you know, you on your Switch on your bed sort of thing. So kind of translating just the way we approach the concept of play. And then we just launched 2 days ago our online publication, transmedia publication, Virtual Grounds, which we are doing with the Digital Justice Lab. And it's a one-year program that was focused on education and research dedicated to feminist perspectives in digital survival and sustainability. So kind of the things that Nikki, you're talking about, and same with you, Anna, about safety online and thinking about the various platforms that we use and dangers with surveillance and facial recognition and machine learning bias and stuff like that. So yeah, it's a big research project, and it'll turn into a publication that will be launched in steps online throughout the fall. So really pumped about that. But again, moving forward, we're still trying to be resourceful. I think like we can all maybe chat about money eventually and how like digital initiatives are relatively underfunded, particularly in Canada. So, or there are very few opportunities to kind of really geek out about this medium and geek out about the various exhibitions, online exhibition spaces that we could potentially build. So yeah, we're just gonna, for now, work with the assets that we have. We have a VR or a mobile app that you can use on your phone that you can watch VR and 360 video works. We're going to do a few new commissions this fall and in the winter time. And then we also have a 3D rendering of the exhibition space, that the gallery space that was made in 2017 by a company called Janus VR. So we're going to like fiddle around with that, and also kind of get into more research creation projects and play around with the residency format a little bit. So yeah, stay tuned.
Yeah, no, it's going to be fun. I was just going to say we got like 3 minutes, so I was just going to say maybe like favorite, like digital media, something that you like in the last few months. What's something that you're excited about, or maybe a wish list of a special chair, Jason, or something to do with what's a kind of like thing that you want to see happen in the future for digital media. Who wants to go? Israel. Oh, you're muted.
Oh, there. So I've been talking about this forever since the pandemic started because I thought it was the coolest thing that I've seen in a long time. And it's called the Coexis Dance Festival. Has anyone heard of it? No? Okay, so these folks have basically been doing these dance festivals in real life, except what they do is they get a composer or a musician and then a dancer, and they pair them up, but they've never met each other. And then they put them in the same room and the musician plays and then the dancer moves to the music that she or he hears, okay? And so when the pandemic hit, they started to do these Facebook Live performances, except that the musician was in their own room watching a Zoom window of the dancer, and the dancer had the Zoom audio available, or they got the audio feed somehow. And then they would do these live streamed performances in totally different places, completely improvisationally. And it was one of the most compelling things I had ever seen. And, they are the only kind of art troupe that I've seen to date since the pandemic started that's really tried to get some form of, again, this notion of liveness, and intimacy. Well, I don't even feel like it was intimate. It was just such an odd thing to be watching on Facebook, but it really, really worked. And you're riveted because you're kind of trying to figure out what's going to happen next. Like how can the dancer feel? How are they going to move? What are they going to do? So I thought that was really cool. So they're a Toronto dance festival company. And then just one more thing. Sorry, shameless plug. But one of the things that happened when the pandemic hit is we said, gosh, what are we going to do? How are we going to galvanize the arts and culture community to be seen as a catalytic force to get people out of their homes and buying stuff on main streets? And so we worked with the city to essentially map out projectionable spaces in Toronto across 25 wards. So we have this now festival in collaboration with the City of Toronto, we meaning OCADU, and AVA Animation has this festival in collaboration with the City of Toronto between now and December to project into public walls across the city and the 25 wards. And I think that's an interesting model, is like, maybe we got to just take the art outside. So thank God we're going into the year of public art. There you go. See, Julie?
I know. I was like, isn't that what I'm doing? I was like, but hey, I'm not actually allowed to because it will draw 1 million people. So I couldn't project outside. I was not allowed.
I know. Well, it has to just be. But the thing is, it was because it was for one night. But if you prolong it for the rest of our lives, then that's really what we want.
Yeah. No, it's true. It's true. Anybody else want to jump in? I don't want to cut anybody off. So wish list.
Jason, you're muted.
You're muted.
Yes.
Sorry.
Call someone out.
My most enjoyable thing has actually been the Scott Pilgrim Saves the World movie cast did a table read as a group, and it was actually phenomenally more enjoyable than I thought. I thought it was going to be kind of nice and cute, but it was really great. And part of it was the liveness that we're talking about. Part of it was they kept everybody up on the screen all at the same time, so that you could sort of watch everybody even when it wasn't their scene, sort of kind of like doing their thing. But it was a really interesting way to kind of bridge between, these actors as people and these actors who are, extremely good at their craft at the same time. It was really compelling. And actually it was both of Scott Winati and I and our 16-year-old and our 13-year-old watched it and really enjoyed it. So there's something about just that simple. It's the audio, like Anna was saying, like it's like the liveness of it, and also sort of like the weird kind of famous people in your living room sort of combination.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. I love just having access to all these panels online and all that. But I had so much fun with the AR Works for Nuit Blanche. Like we had a whole day. Oh man, it was just like a photo shoot. And it was such a great way to just experience art and get out of the space and to go outside. And I loved it. I think there could definitely be more programming like that. And there were so many options. It wasn't just like one piece. So yeah, it was.
I also like the versatility. I like some had sound, some you could make massive, some rotated, you could film. Like the incredibleness of being able to take that work anywhere, like seeing the posts, like I see Leuli in the chat, like seeing Leuli and Chorus posts on the other side of the planet, or one in the subarctic, like it was just such an incredible win. I think that where you can take it, right? Mm-hmm. Anybody else? Thanks, Ra. I appreciate that. That was unsolicited.
I mean, I was going to mention that one too. Like, they were beautiful works, and I loved, like, even just thinking about the usability of how to access them. You didn't have to download an app. It was very simple, and yeah, it was nice to just explore, which is, what is necessary for Nuit Blanche, and to see digital art as public art. I've also been really into memes, and I've been following some pretty hilarious Instagram accounts. So I hate to say that would be my favorite thing right now, but.
Should we break out into Fleetwood Mac now?
I was like,
oh yeah, there we go.
Everyone
there it is. I love Dogface.
Is that your home page, Nikki?
What?
Is that your home screen?
That's on my Instagram, yes. Well, because last night, I'm not gonna lie, I ran to Jason Momoa, and then I was like, I gotta listen to our like favorite uncle right now, and I just put
exactly.
I was like,
exactly.
Take me home.
How about you, Brooke? Any favorites?
Well, look, I'm just saying I'm really enjoying all this happiness now, because it's actually been really tough for Indigenous communities, and especially for us. Like, I don't know if you're following what's happening in Australia, but all the states and territories have their own powers within the government. It's not actually run by the federal government because of Federation in 1901. So, excuse me, all the boundaries are closed and borders. And so it's also hard to get out to traditional lands. And I think that if anything, it's highlighting the issues and urgency that I know that a lot of you have been talking about tonight in solidarity. And that is Indigenous communities having access to high-speed internet, actually around issues of healing. You often go out to country to heal. And I think that, I suppose there's one plus side about this, is that connecting with students, but also family members over Zoom, it's actually changing the culture of what Zoom was actually created for. So normally it was very formal, it was kind of quite boring lectures, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that the kind of format and how that's actually done and driven is really shifted a lot. But yeah, sure, the kind of meme stuff's really fun, but most people don't have phones, or, do you know what I mean? I don't mean to be a downer, but I just think that it actually, in a positive way, if I can say that, it kind of highlights actually what's missing, and hopefully the kind of so-called, multiple millions, hundreds of millions of dollars, which is pumped into Indigenous communities, often goes into the coffers of, normally non-Indigenous governments or corporations, non-Indigenous managers or corporations that spat out the side. And where is the outcome for that? And I think that it's highlighting a lot of those issues at the moment. So I'm hoping for whatever. I don't even want to talk about post-COVID, because in fact, if anything, COVID was kind of a blessing in disguise, because it highlighted all of these kind of problems with the way in which that the structure and the government's education system, et cetera, is all set up. But yeah, that's,
I think
hopefully see there's some changes in that area as well.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. Nikki, you want the last word there, my dear?
Well, no, I was just gonna say, Brooke, like, one thing that I was in Nirin and I was so excited, then I had to leave early because Julie's like, we should probably go. And I was like, okay, okay. But
Because I don't think I met half of you either. Like, it was just really chaotic.
Mm-hmm. And I think for the website afterwards, that I think that really emulated with me, that was really simple, is that when you go to the website, the Indigenous land acknowledgement was right there. And it was like, you have to go through that little moment. For me, I think was just like really interesting to think about how people are going to be working now, and especially pivoting all of these organizations to online. And so how do we continue to like ensure people are thinking about those things moving forward? And I think like we gleaned that for sure, because that was the one thing I was like, I really loved how grounded the Biennale was in Indigenous practices and thought. And so I really enjoyed like that little moment for me, just in terms of that part, was so meaningful. And I think that was so important, and just highlights all of the other things that, like, a little tidbit into like all of the other social issues that are happening and that we're constantly talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the digital platform, like, no one really owns that, right? So there's no issues of colonization. If anything, there's issues of, ongoing maybe kind of corporatization, or kind of like that cultural space. And I think that's what even Jason was talking about in regards to, those kind of imaginative places that you can go to. What's it called? First Life or something? I don't really.
Second Life.
Second Life. I'm not into that gaming stuff. My son is, that's for sure. But I'm a bit of an old man when it comes to that. But I think that it's important to know that they're fresh spaces, right? We can kind of do whatever we want. I think it's what's so empowering about this whole panel is that that's what we've all been doing, and many other people as well. It's really a great way to feel great and good about it. And even that basic thing that you were talking about, Nikki, of like, having the welcome to country or acknowledgement of country. I mean, that happens on many museums here, but I've been working in some museums, projects like in the USA and stuff, and I'm so surprised that hasn't happened. And that even working, with and talking with some of the like a panel at the Getty, like they want to get a First Nations kind of group together and they want to acknowledge that. It's like, it's not actually that hard, but they have this kind of bureaucratic, institutionalized system that buckles them, that cripples them. That for us, it's the opposite. We're on the kind of opposite side of the mirror. It's like, we've been doing this for ages. Like, can we just like move on now? And yeah, and it's great to meet you all and know about all the awesome, inspiring work that you've been doing for a long time as well.
Yeah, I want to reiterate that. Well, that's where we'll leave. And I want to say, Chi-miigwech, Marcy, thank you for bringing your good hearts, good minds to the virtual square boxes that we're currently now living in. And I just, I'm so thankful for your guys' work and energy and all the bits that you bring to the table. And I normally have to do like a proper closing, but I'm going to kind of rush today and I might get in trouble. So number one, NUI Independent Projects is now open. So please log in, join it, do whatever you got to do. And I want to say Chi-miigwech Marcy to Nor Banku, who's been my research assistant and helping with all the talks. And she's like secretly behind the scenes doing all the bits. And I totally adore her. And I just want to make sure she gets credit where credit's due. And I want to say thanks to the city of Toronto for being, for like standing by me and like making sure that this entire thing happened. And I think that we totally, really pushed people's comfort zones in terms of thinking about what a virtual public art exhibition could be. And so I'm really thankful. And I'm so thankful that we've had over 40 speakers over the last few weeks, and the podcasts are going to continue, and we're going to pick up the speaker series in the new year. And so thank you so much for everybody for coming along on this crazy ride. Chi-miigwech, Marcy, thanks guys.
Thanks, Julie. Thanks
Thank
all.
you so much.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Well,